was frequently observed, and eventually I recognized that I needed to learn how to read music. So I did just that. I therefore comprehend that portion. For many years, the world viewed Jimmy Page as the enigmatic genius behind Led Zeppelin, responsible for some of the most recognizable rock riffs ever. However, Bob Seger has finally broken the taboo and spoken up about Page's darker side today. Conflicts, rivalries, and scandals that many fans were afraid to bring up. What Seger disclosed was not only the tale of a genius, but of a man whose gift was continually eclipsed by conflict and resentment. Jimmy Page became extremely popular in the late 1960s, when clubs in London were teeming with psychedelic colors and energy. With his guitar creating walls of sound that left spectators speechless, he appeared invincible on stage. But there was a darker stream flowing backstage. He was the genius behind Led Zeppelin's transformation into a thunderous musical beast. However, the same characteristics that gave rise to the mythology also bred anxiety. There were already rumors circulating behind the glitzy success. Musicians that collaborated with him characterized him as a clever but cunning, charismatic but oppressively domineering individual. Even amongst contemporaries, Page exuded a charismatic yet threatening aura that simultaneously captivated and unnerved. Admired from afar but seldom trusted in person, it was impossible to conceal the tensions inside Led Zeppelin. Page and Robert Plant frequently disagreed on artistic choices, particularly when Page's fixation on more sinister mystical images overpowered the music. Plant's high-pitched voice yearned for freedom and brightness. Page, however, created a continuous tug-of-war by dragging the music into the shadows. Torn between admiration for Page's brilliance and resentment of his oppressive control, meek and reticent John Paul Jones became unhappy with his domination and unpredictable conduct. Additionally, when Page's decisions threatened to destabilize the band, John Bonham, the ferocious drummer, would occasionally snap. The Yapai would briefly lock together like lightning and thunder. Then they would erupt into wall-shaking arguments. In reality, the gang that seemed unbeatable on stage was a battleground of resentment and egos. What is brilliance measured against? Destruction. Rivalry poisons harmony. Consider the outrageous tales of rock excess from the 1970s that you have heard. Jimmy Page is the center of several of them. He went into dangerous spirals due to the drugs and alcohol. He gained a reputation that was less about music and more about insanity, a legend shrouded in smoke and darkness. While the infamous parties at the Continental Hyatt House and Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles turned into arenas of mayhem, where glitz and ruin collided, the mystique was only heightened by rumors of Page's occult affiliation, which made him appear to some as a sound sorcerer and to others as a man ensnared in perilous delusions. Many friends and associates saw it as a threat rather than a mystery, a diversion that undermined confidence and alienated people. Others looked for momentary happiness in the mayhem, but Page, a figure whose brightness contrasted constantly with the pit he gazed into, frequently appeared to fuel darker demons. Page's disagreements with his bandmates continued. Competing guitarists, such as Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton, resented his haughtiness but yet reluctantly appreciated the intensity of his playing. Backstage, tour managers and record producers talked about countless arguments. Others acknowledged that Page's devotion occasionally elevated performances to grandeur, while he demanded complete control and clashed with anyone who attempted to oppose him. I did receive an apology out of it, but there has been a smoke cream of crap and this kind of stupid stuff about Jimmy Page's sleeping in his lawn and all this rubbish. He had a notorious rivalry with the Rolling Stones camp. The biggest names in rock were embroiled in a Cold War that combined inspiration and animosity, as both sides accused the other of stealing their ideas. Every victory Page won seemed to be accompanied by an equally acerbic argument, a dichotomy of awe and hostility that followed him everywhere. Around Page, interpersonal interactions frequently broke down, leaving a path of pain and disappointment in their wake. Once they were part of his inner group, musicians who had admired him from a distance found working with him to be a nightmare. Even the strongest relationships were weakened by the atmosphere of mistrust he fostered by insisting on total control, manipulation, and secrecy. As Pa's quick ascent with Zeppelin left them feeling abandoned and deceived, Old Yardard's pals like Chris Drea and Jim McCarty became estranged. Once believing colleagues eventually spoke of unfulfilled promises, unpaid bills, and initiatives that fell apart due to his unpredictable actions. Weary of the never-ending cycle of indulgence, paranoia, and power, even his once supportive allies eventually turned against him. Many saw relationship with Page as a tightrope walk above chaos, one that ended in quiet and isolation rather than loyalty. Control was both Page's greatest skill and weakness. He insisted on it above Led Zeppelin's music, image, and even myth. He dictated all the notes in rehearsals. He forced engineers to work through long periods in the act studio till the break of day. Additionally, he micromanaged every aspect of stage presentation while on tour. He lost control of himself, however, the more he sought to control everything. Studio engineers remembered how his perfectionism destroyed countless evenings as Page insisted on take after take until he lost his cool. As they catered to his every need, the tour personnel spoke of their own tiredness and rage, bearing the burden of his obsession while also giving into it. And his fellow musicians, watching as the band's togetherness disintegrated under Page's relentless control, where innovation all too frequently drowned in the shadow of dominance, they learned to hate the guy who could not relinquish control. Outside the spotlight, Page had to deal with struggles that left him feeling very shaken. He struggled with addiction, which led him into a vicious cycle of reliance that damaged not just his reputation and physical well-being but also his soul. Alcohol and heroin became his frequent friends, pulling him into shadowy areas where Led Zeppelin's vitality felt like a thing of the past. He fluctuated between phases of genius and collapse, occasionally shining on stage and other times disappearing for extended periods of time that alarmed co-workers and fans. His hands trembled, his weight fluctuated, and those who knew him frequently spoke of a man torn between self-destruction and greatness. There were reports of overdoses, hospitals, and precarious recoveries for the supposedly impenetrable musician. Friends talked of unsuccessful interventions and quiet nights spent with Page gazing into space. He became a prisoner of his own demons, as well as the creator of everlasting music. Once in charge of arenas, this man now found it difficult to lead himself. It's not just Bob Seger that treated Page with contempt. There is a lengthy list of names in the rock world that irritated him. The Who's Pete Townsend, who had long been annoyed by Zeppelin's tremendous success, publicly disapproved of Page's strategy, calling his presence oppressive and his manner exaggerated. Former Yardbirds teammate Jeff Beck harbored resentment following years of antagonism and unspoken rivalry. Feeling eclipsed by Page's quick rise, Eric Clapton discreetly withdrew and never forgiven the haughtiness he saw in him. Others in the rock scene muttered that Page's enigmatic persona was an extension of his true self rather than a performance. Many of his contemporaries feared him rather than liked him because he was consumed by his own power. Behind the scenes, journalists, producers, and even critics acknowledged that going up against him was risky, unpredictable, and electric, like walking into a hurricane. He was caught up in rivalries that shaped entire periods of rock history and feuds that never ended because his aura both attracted and repulsed people. These days, the fiery guitar solos, the dragon outfits, and the ethereal aura are frequently evoked when people think of Jimmy Page. However, another picture is revealed as a result of Seger's disclosures. That of a man who rose to prominence but alienated a significant number of people in the process. His life turned into a battleground of victories and setbacks, genius and evil, obsession and ruin. What's left is a lengthy history of strained relationships, resentful rivalries, and destroyed friendships, in addition to a collection of timeless music. Those around him suffered an equally severe pain for each accomplishment that elevated him into the pantheon of rock. Legendary riff tales coexist with tales of resentment, rage, and alienation, creating a legacy in the E that is both paradoxical and unforgettable. And music isn't the only aspect of his tale. It is about the poison of ego, the dangerous weight of control, and the never-ending thirst for power that left everyone who dared to be near him traumatized. It is the tale of a genius who, despite dragging shadows behind him, achieved unthinkable heights. A legacy that is simultaneously glistening and eerie, always divided between awe and anxiety, publicly celebrated yet privately lamented by those who paid the price for his ambition.